Welcome to the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast. I am your host, Ann Austin, and it is my pleasure to bring quality programs to all of you. I am excited yet again with another amazing speaker. We have so many this year. Over 60 speakers are on this platform. I know I done gone crazy with that, but please tune in and listen to this podcast as well as all the podcasts that are posted on all the pages. Check them out, call them up, and connect with them because they are here to share their information with you. So there's a lot of good stuff that you just cannot get anywhere else. So please take advantage of this unique opportunity. Just in case you did not know, the purpose of the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast is not only to network our small businesses, but we're also here to share information with you, the working professional and new career seekers, so that you can help and decide what you want to do for your career. We also want to take a moment to thank our corporate partners who are our family of authors, Butler Armstead Consulting Solutions, Human Resource Learning Center, J&F Enterprises, and Women Offering Wealth, along with many of our business partners and sponsors who is helping to make this season a success. So as you can tell from the podcast, we have a whole group of different type of industries from healthcare to finance, and so we have another amazing speaker here who is in the healthcare sort of therapy, family, all that stuff. She's hot on Facebook. I'm seeing her just go all town on Instagram, and I wanted to bring her on here because we talk about business all the time. We talk about healthcare, but we are a people first. And so one of the things we're going to talk about on this podcast is just really fostering family relationships. And so with this, I want to bring Kiaundra Jackson. She is a visionary of KW Couples Therapy and co-founder of KW Essential Services and Black Speakers Rock. She is a trusted and licensed marriage and family therapist that get results. As a graduate of Azusa Pacific University, she is currently serving as a private practitioner working with a broad spectrum of clients. She also has a Master's of Art degree in clinical psychology, marriage, and family therapy. One of her expertise is premarital and marital issues. She deals with a lot of anger management issues, and she's also specialized in addiction, anxiety, and depression. And so I want you guys to continue reading her bio because she has a lot of different specialties, and so we want to get right into the podcast. So welcome, Kiaundra, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Anne, for having me. I appreciate you so much. I am excited to get started.
Oh, I am appreciative of all of you, especially you. And thank you so much for being a business sponsor for this year's podcast. I am so happy that you're here. And so we kind of want to get right into it. Tell us all about yourself, where you're from, and what was that aha moment that got you into therapy?
Oh, wow. I'm actually from Los Angeles, California. I am the visionary and CEO of KW Couples Therapy, and I'm also the co-founder of Black Speakers Rock and KW Essential Services. There's been so much that has transpired and that has happened on my journey, but I think the aha moment for me was a culmination of things. I grew up in a single parent home. And honestly, there was so much that happened in my own household, in my own family unit, that really, really pushed me to get to a place where I wanted to focus on helping others maintain strong, long-lasting relationships, whether that was in their family unit or an intimate relationship. I didn't really have a good example of what that looked like. So I made it a personal mission of mine. And it is currently a personal mission of mine to help 10,000 couples heal after affairs, increase intimacy, increase communication, and maintain a lasting, long, healthy relationship.
Okay, so fantastic. So, I want to take a step back. So you mentioned that, you grew up in a single family household and things like that. Did you have family members that have very long, other than just your parents, did you have other family members that have very long lasting relationships and that kind of just got your attention on that aspect?
To be honest with you, I didn't see too many long-lasting relationships in my life. Even now, I don't have many people in my life who I can say, you know what, they have a very successful relationship. I've seen a lot of broken relationships, honestly, and the only relationship that really lasted a long time was my grandmother and my grandfather, who were married for I want to say like 40 plus years
Yeah, you know, those,
prior to my grandpa
yeah,
passing away.
I could
Yeah.
tell you that it is really hard to have a really long-lasting relationship. I think, like you said, your grandparents, like my grandparents, was married almost 50 years, and then their parents was married just as long, equal amount of time. I think for me, I've been married 18 of those years. So I would just
Wow.
say, it is very hard. It takes a lot of work, to get into that type of thing. So, Kiandra, let me ask you, in terms of, I'm gonna just go right into it. In terms of for the Black community, the minority community, in your experience, what have you seen as far as relationships? Are there more broken relationships, or are there just people just really trying to make it work? Tell us about that.
Honestly, I feel like there's a lot more broken relationships in the African American community. And it's all about sometimes about how we start relationships. Sometimes we start relationships not in the best state. And by that, I mean, like, we're not in a position where we should even be thinking about relationships. We have our own issues that we have to work through and work on prior to getting into a relationship. But sometimes we don't do the necessary work for us to do that on our own. And then, some fine man or some fine woman comes along and catches our attention. And we say, hey, like, let's jump right in and let's, start this relationship. And then, unfortunately, down the road, that relationship doesn't work out, or it crumbles, or, it goes south. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of. Like, people do not start relationships with the right intentions, with the right motives, and the right foundation. So there isn't a solid rock to stand on when things start to crumble and go a little awry. So that's what I'm seeing more so with us in the African American community. We have a very high, I can say, a percentage of us who don't marry, and we kind of like, or we get complacent and we just stay in our situations. I'm not saying that's the fact and true for everyone, but that's what I'm seeing in my practice and with the couples that I work with.
Okay. Well, the reason why I had asked that question, because a lot of times we're told, oh, right before you get married, you need to go see someone to see if you're compatible. But by that time, you've already lived with the person, or you've already been with the person.
Exactly.
So, how do you feel about having that type of, mediation therapy prior to, or when you first get into a relationship? And I guess this is just based on your experience of some of the common problems, and if you want to touch on some of the common problems of why relationships are broken, that'll also be helpful as well.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate of premarital counseling. So I think it's wonderful that people, right before they say I do and get married, that they go and get help from a priest or a counselor. I do a lot of premarital counseling as well. So I love that aspect of it. But I always talk about what needs to happen before the ring and after the ring. And sometimes before the ring is not always about right when you get engaged. It's about maintaining the relationship far before the engagement even happens. So I tell people that they need to start identifying some of the red flags that they see in their relationship. Way before you get engaged, way before you think about saying I do. And if at some point in your relationship, even before you get married or think about, committing, if you guys want to go and sit down with someone such as myself to get an honest opinion about where we're at and where we need to be moving towards, that's something that people should do. And I think that that's not seen as often, as frequent as it needs to be seen. Because the truth is that a lot of the core issues are not being addressed. And that's what really breaks people up in the long run. So, and I just recently did a blog post about the top 3 relationship killers that happens. And the top 3 are actually money issues, sex, and poor communication. And so with these 3 areas, I tell people, if these are the 3 areas that are breaking people up on a regular basis, these are the areas where you have to stay on top of, right? Like these are the areas that you need to check in frequently and make sure that your relationship is on point with. And so I really talk about having candid discussions with your partner, with your mate, about certain topics and certain things, especially in regards to these three areas. You know, as far as money goes, I talk about, you know, creating financial goals with your partner, talking about any debt that you might have, planning for the future, discussing budgeting and monthly allowances and overspending and spending habits, you know, from the past, present, and for future. In regards to sex, I hope we don't have any young viewers and listeners on here.
Oh, it's quite all right. It's just you okay? You okay? You know, you good. But you know what? I want to just jump in just real quick before you go into the other topics, because what you said was very interesting. Is that when it comes to money and it comes to these other two things, really it boils down to just communication. Communication is very key, and you have to have that and trust, because those are the two things that get people to open up, but also getting people to accept who you are as a person. And I'm only speaking really from my own relationships that I've had over the years, and then comparing that relationship to the relationship I have now is night and day. Just night and day, just talking to people.
Yeah.
We have, and I can tell you, me and my husband have issues when it comes to money, but we talk about it and then we compromise and work something out so that we both are happy. But if it's anything relating to money, we know how to handle it. Now, I'm not going to speak on the other two topics because that might be a bit personal, but I will say that we pretty much talk about everything. We really do. And I think it's important. I wanted to kind of jump in and say that before you got into the other two topics, because communication is the key.
So communication is the number one key. That's all people will hear me talk about. Two things. I talk about creating intimacy, which goes far beyond just sex. You know, I talk a lot about physical, sexual, emotional, and spiritual intimacy. And I always talk about effective two-way communication. And I tell people that, you know, we have all of these issues going on. We talk about money, sex, and infidelity, and doing this and doing that. But at the end of the day, if we're not communicating about these things, if we're not having conversations about them, then they're just going to fester and they're going to bubble over and it's going to get worse. So I tell people that the root cause of a lot of these other issues is the fact that there's poor communication to begin with. So if I can continue with the other two.
Go right ahead. I'm interested now.
Relationship killers. I got your attention now, right? I said sex.
I'm pretty sure everybody on this podcast wants to know now about the sex and the other part. So you just go right on ahead, do your thing.
Absolutely. So sex is another big relationship killer. Like there's always a high desire sexual partner and a low desire sexual partner in every single relationship. And people think that, oh my goodness, that means that one person just doesn't want to have sex. But no, you can have two people with a high sex drive, but at some point there's always one person that wants it a little bit more than the other person in every relationship. And at that point, the person who wants it a little bit more and has the higher sexual drive and desire, they are the ones who might feel some type of way, because you know what? In actuality, the other person controls the sexual frequency. Did you hear that, Ann?
I heard you, but you know what? I think it's true to a point. It is true to a point. Mm-hmm. But again, it's one of those things where the other person has to have that trust.
Yeah, and communicate.
To not only just trust the person who has the control of the frequency, but also accept it as well. And then the person who controls it has to have trust that the other person will be patient. And that is the two-way street that has to happen. I think that for me, in my mind, that is where the line is drawn between being faithful and, you know, going off and doing your own thing.
Yes,
I mean, that's, you know, but see, you're the therapist, though, so I'm going to
No, what you said is 100%. Yeah, what you said is 100% right. I mean, if one person wants to have sex once a week and the other person wants to have sex 10 times a week, then that's a huge difference. And somebody needs to have a conversation about, look, I wanted a little bit more than once a week. And how can we compromise with that? And the reason why I only want it once a week, and go into dialogue about the sexual style, the frequency, your desires. Like, you have to express these things, because people go through relationships thinking that the other person is a mind reader. And honestly, Ed, that is not the case at all. Sometimes you have to state exactly what you want, exactly what you need from your partner. Like, just because you've been with them for, you said that you've been with your husband for what you said, 16 or 18 years?
18 years.
18,
18
right?
long but very good years, though. But very good.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes people think that just because you've been together for so long that the other person is just supposed to know, your wants and desires. Like, we change as human beings all the time. And sometimes you just have to flat out say, hey, babe, I want to get it in 3 times a week instead of 1. Like, can we compromise on that and talk about it? So yeah, that's when fidelity and infidelity issues, like we just talked about, arise. And that's when people step out of relationships, because they're not talking about what they want and what they need.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to add to your point is that you need to tell your partner from day one, this is your expectation.
Absolutely.
Don't get into the relationship and everything is all good and you never told your partner about your frequency, because the other person could have some other issues. They could feel a certain way about it. They could have physical issues and just cannot meet that demand. And if you feel like, that you need it a little less or you need a little more, that is the time you need to tell your partner and just accept the fact you might not be a compatible match and be friends. It's better to just have it that way than for the one person to start feeling kind of mad or upset at the other person because they can't perform to that expectation.
Exactly.
So let's go into
that's 100% correct.
Yeah, so let's talk about the third point right there, because we got to leave that one. We got to cool that subject down a little bit. So let's talk about the third one. Yeah.
The third point is poor communication, right? So people need to start addressing issues as they occur. So and I like to say we, because sometimes I do this too, right? Especially as women, we have it bad. I got to talk about us for a minute real quick. Sometimes we don't really always express ourselves because we tend to be a little bit more emotional than men. And so when we have an issue or something arises, we tend to say, oh, he might say, oh, what's going on with you? Are you okay? And we're like, nothing. And there's something that's clearly bothering us, but we continue to say nothing. And then, things bubble over. And so I like to say that we need to address things as they happen. Don't wait 2 weeks. Don't wait 2 months or 2 years and start bringing up things that happened so long ago. And it's like, wow, I thought we got past that. Wow, you're still thinking about that? You still brought that up? So it's important to address things as they happen, as they occur. And the other thing that I like to tell people is to listen to understand, and not just to respond. I come across couples all day who I literally have to teach how to actively listen to their partner. I have them paraphrase back and forth. Hey, what did your partner just say? And a lot of the times it's completely off. I'm like, you really just heard that right now? Because that's not at all what that person just said. So I teach people how to actively listen, because a lot of the times people just wait until the person stops talking, or if there's a pause, just to get their point in, but they're not really listening to comprehend. And the last tip that I will say is to avoid having difficult conversations at the end of the day when you're tired. At the end of a work day, that's when poor communication will, reveal itself the most. Like when we're tired, when we're exhausted, and we need to have these conversations. Try not to have those at the end of the day or at times where you already feel stressed and tense. Plan for another time or another day. So have those conversations in the morning time or during your lunch break or on a weekend, whenever that happens, but not when you're tired, because you will get a different type of ending and a result than you are expecting from your partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, man. Communication can reveal a lot of things about another person and yourself. And so, just like Kiaundra said, those are really good tips to live by. I would just strongly suggest that you have those candid conversations, even if you think the other person don't want to hear it, because at the end of the day, if you're a couple, you are living with that person. You're living with them all the
Yeah,
time. You're
yeah.
around them all the time, and they have to accept you and you have to accept them. So it doesn't hurt to kind of put those three things, those three practices in place and maybe focus on number two sometimes and figure out what you want to do with that. But communication is the key. And one of the things that and I can share this, and I'm pretty sure my husband's like, why are you sharing this? But I just think it's very helpful, so I'm going to share it. One of the things that my husband and I like to do is pick one day out of the week to just talk about what's on our minds.
I love it,
To
love
just
it, love it.
to just we always pick the morning because we're morning people, okay? So
Hmm.
we would just sit there, maybe eat breakfast or whatever it is we're doing, we would just talk about what has been on our minds and our hearts. And because, like you said earlier, you touched on it, is that people change over time. You don't mean to change, but you change. You get older, you get set in your ways.
Yeah, that's
Your
so true.
perception changes, your ideals, your goals, your mission, everything changes. And it doesn't mean you don't love the person any less. You just have a different outlook on things. And so it's very helpful for the other person to know that there is something about you that has changed, and or you have a different aspiration or goal, because you never know. What tends to happen that I see when couples are broke up is because one person's vision has changed and they didn't communicate it with the other, so
Exactly.
they both thinking they're still on the same path when really they're on two or three different paths. So what we like to do is to talk about, what do you want to do 5 years from now? What do you want to do 10 years from now? Do you want to retire, or do you want to just go do something? And then we both come together and say, oh, I didn't know you want to do that. And so we think on it, we come back and talk about it some more, and then we plan, what are we going to do as a couple
Uh-huh.
together. And I think between that and communication is the reason why we've been such a strong couple.
That's
Such a strong.
powerful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that. I think that that's a valid point, because people change over time, and how you function in the beginning of your relationship is not how you're going to function in the middle and the end, right? We all go through, just like we go through life cycles, like being a child and teenager and adult and, elderly. We go through this whole process. So does your relationship. And what things happen, children happen, career changes, financial differences, getting laid off, new jobs, new goals, new visions, businesses, all of these things happen. And you have to make sure that you're on the same path at all times. Because the biggest thing now is people talk about, relationship goals. Hey, hashtag relationship goals. Yeah, you should have goals for your relationship. And I hope that you and your partner are sitting down and making a clear cut plan and revisiting that plan as frequently as possible to make sure that you guys are on the same page. So I commend you and your husband, Ann, for
Oh, well,
doing
thank
that, because
you.
that's awesome. Like,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, and I'm gonna tell you folks, being in a relationship takes work. It is not an automatic thing. There is no instruction manual. It's just you and that other person just being very honest and open, and just making yourself vulnerable so that the other person understands and really sees who you are as a person. And if you could just do that as a couple and just stay faithful, then you'll have a good thing. So Kiandra, we just stuck on this subject for a minute. So let's just turn this subject over a little bit to the business side of things, because even
Yeah.
though we have couples, like I said, we're individuals, and a lot of times we tend to bring our problems to the workplace, specifically our relationships, things that's going on which affects us in terms of working with other coworkers. So how does your service actually help people, or what do you think entrepreneurs should really utilize audio service so that they have a really good working relationship with their employees?
What I love about the communication piece that we mentioned is that that's applicable to different areas of our life. It's not just about our relationships and, marriage and all of those things, but how you communicate with your boss and your employees and people out in public and strangers. Like, it's about how you communicate in general. So when you start honing in on those different areas of, and enhancing your skills of actively listening and noticing your body language. And I always talk about meta communication, about facial expressions and body language and your tone of voice. When you start to become more aware of yourself, that's when you'll be able to increase the relationships that you have with other people. So I think it's super important for even employers and, business people alike to understand the importance of this. It can transform a person's life, because we all have issues. Like, it's hard sometimes to separate. You're going through something and you might bring that to the workplace, or you might bring that to your job, or to wherever you go. But it's important to really, really make sure that you are staying on top of what you need to stay on top of in regards to communication. Did I answer your question, Anne? I feel like
Yeah,
I'm missing a piece.
yeah. No, 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 no. You answered the question. I just
Mhm.
think that it's important for entrepreneurs or business owners who have staff to recognize if an employee is having, some type of personal issues, but not really to get into their personal issue, but maybe offer some type of support in terms of maybe offering them the EAP program, or maybe
Mhm.
mentioning to them, or maybe even referring them to your type of service that have some kind of mediation or some type of therapy, because in the Black community it is really hard for us already just to do what we do. And I want to use this platform as a resource for those who are in need of some type of mediation or some kind of couple or individual therapy that would help them with communication or being able to work with people and things of that nature. So I was kind of seeing if you can offer some type of solution in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the things that you just mentioned, like I have, even in my private practice, I get a lot of referrals from EAP, which is an employer assistance program for people who don't know, where an employer literally will pay for a service that provides that employee with a certain number of counseling sessions free of charge to them. So you might have 5 or 10 or 3. Um, where that person can come and talk about their issues free of charge to them, because they want to make sure that that person is being an effective individual so they can still be productive at work. And so when you see a person who's having some type of issues, whether they're relationship issues, whether it's mental health issues, physical issues, we should just be more cautious and kind to other people and check in with people. I think so many times we live in this fast-paced world where we're just walking by people and we're just trying to get to where we need to get to and do what we need to do, that we don't stop to really think and ask people, "How are you?" and wait for their genuine response. We're so quick to say, "Good, fine, it's okay," or "I'm blessed," and all of this stuff. But sometimes there's people who need us to take an extra moment to say, "No, are you really good?" And just providing that open space for them to be able to dialogue with you. And if you notice anything with someone, feel free to, saying, "Hey, I don't want to be all in your business, but maybe you should talk to somebody about that. Maybe you should get some professional help."
Yeah, you definitely have to do that. And so, going into the next segment of this conversation, from a career standpoint, in your professional opinion, do you have, or is there a lot of representation of minorities in your field? Because what I'm getting and hearing through some of the different industries, even legal and some of the big ones, that there's not a lot of representation of minorities in these fields.
I think that can be true. In California, there is a heavy population, I guess you can say, of social workers and therapists out here. So there's a large pool of us. Majority of us are women. But I can definitely say that there has been an increase in African American, I guess you can say, those who are in the helping field, such as myself. I think it's becoming more prevalent because people are seeing that, you know what, we need help too. um, and starting to kind of break down the stigma of, going to see a clinician or going to see a therapist, and really being able to find someone that you can relate to. It's funny because I have so many clients who literally, they might find me on social media or through a referral source, and they're so excited that I'm black. They're so excited that I'm a naturalista and I have natural hair. Like, they are like so excited to meet someone who can potentially relate to them on that level. So I think for all the black therapists that are out there, that we should definitely rise up to the occasion and make ourselves known. That's why I love the Huffington Post article that I was featured in. Because it just shed light on 10 Black female therapists you should know, all across the globe. And it was awesome because she wound up doing a male list as well, 15 Black male therapists you should know. And it really started a really good conversation because it really showed the world that we exist. we're out there, we're doing the work, we're helping people, we're changing lives, and these are the people that you should talk to. Or if if you're not in that state, you can reach out to them to get some more information about resources. So I think, and we're becoming more present. There's been an increase in number, I should say.
Okay, great, fantastic. And so, if someone wanted to get into your career field, what are some of the characteristics that a person like yourself must have when you're dealing with couples? Because I have another person who's also on the podcast that does a different type of therapy, actually, two or three other people that do a type of therapy. But because you deal specifically with couples and those type of things, I wanted to kind of give the people who are listening and those who may be thinking about getting into some type of therapist, specifically what you do, what type of characteristics do they have to have in order to do what you do?
First and foremost, you have to have the passion to really help people. If you do not have that passion to help people, to see people through their darkest times and hours, then this is definitely not the field for you, because you will experience a lot of things that most people are not able to manage in their regular life. So you have to have, I guess you can say, you have to have tough skin also. I've heard some of the most beautiful stories, and I've heard some of the most horrendous ones at the same time. So you have to be able to be able to separate, from your own personal stuff and being able to help another client through their own issues. So first, I would say compassion, the desire to help people, thick skin, and the ability to listen. You have to be a really, really good listener, and being objective and not allowing your own issues and things that you might go through personally to bleed into your relationship with your clients. For me, I would say that this is something that I feel like God has called me to be honest with you. Like, this is something that He placed on the inside of me at an early age. I didn't really know very early on. It kind of was like a little scary to me, because when I was growing up, middle school and high school, I was the go-to person. Like, I was the secret keeper. Everybody knew to come to me for their issues and talk to me, and I absolutely hated it. And I was like, oh my gosh, why is everyone coming to me with their issues? Like, I cannot stand this. But honestly, as I got older, I started to understand why that happened to me at an early age. That was preparation for what I'm doing now. So for me, it's a calling, and I love it. Like, I know a lot of other therapists who hate working with couples. They do not like it. They're like, how do you do that? It's two people. They're bickering back and forth potentially. It's too much to handle in a counseling session, but it's something that I was made for. I was built for this. So in addition to all of the things that I just mentioned, like, you have to be able to really enjoy your job to be able to work with couples.
Absolutely.
It's tough work, but it has its beautiful portions as well.
Yeah, and I want to just drive home this summary is that no matter what industry you're in, including what you do, it is hard work. I mean, there is education that you have to go through, there's training that you have to do. There's also understanding that people are human, and you're human. And so that human factor has to be there if you want to work with anyone in terms of counseling. So, Kiaundra, you got everything blown up on Facebook and Instagram about all the different activities that you are in. Talk about some of the initiatives that's coming up for you and any other projects that you want people to know about.
You know what, Anna, I have been blessed with so many amazing opportunities within the last few weeks that I'm just like blown away. So tomorrow, I will be at Bethany Kojic Church, where I will be speaking on mental health at a women's group. And I'm so excited about that, because one of the pastors really reached out to me, and she really focuses on bridging the gap between mental health and the church. So I'm excited to really be there to shed some light, to break down some stigmas, to answer some questions with the women there. And then an upcoming week, I will also be at the Love CEO Institute in Los Angeles, California, where I will be speaking about relationships and making sure that you have how to have healthy relationships and improve the relationships with your family and your spouse or your partner. So I have a few things coming up that I am excited about. Since we've been talking about communication, I have developed the do's and don'ts of effective communication, the couples edition of that. So anyone that's listening who is saying, hey, I need to take my relationship to another level, I need to focus on my communication and making sure that I'm on point with that, you should definitely go out and get that. You can get that at kwcouplestherapy.com/promo. And yeah, that's what I have going on, Ann.
Okay. And so, as any other business that's participating in this podcast and those are listening, what do you need to thrive?
What do I need to thrive? That's a wonderful question. To thrive, I think I need the support, the genuine support of my close family and friends and colleagues. I realize that in this season, it's very important to have amazing connections with people. And sometimes in the business world, it can be a little isolative because we're just so focused on our own business and, creating customers and getting clients and profits that we're not always making those genuine connections with other people. So I think in this season, I need to make sure that I'm maintaining my close connection with other people to be able to thrive. And I think that will help me personally and professionally and business-wise. So I am open to creating more meaningful relationships with others.
Fantastic. And so I want to make a summary of everything that has talked about on this thing, from hot to cold, to relationships, to money, to communication.
We covered it all.
That's right. To making sure that you have a cohesive, and again, folks, these podcasts is here to not only to share business and services, but also to educate, to raise awareness of things that we in the African American and all of the minority communities need to improve on, including health, mental health, health care, all that. Listen to the podcast, visit all the pages. Their contact information, including Kiaundra's, is on their page. Reach out to them. Call them, ask questions, network with them, and most of all, patron our business, because we are all small businesses and we need your support because you are our customers. And so that is just really important. And so with that, Kiaundra, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today and being very candid. It was definitely fun. Learning more about I'm going to tell you, I've learned some new stuff too that I'm going to have to go back to my husband and say, did you know? Kiaundra said this, and I'm pretty sure he's going to
so funny.
Yeah, I mean, we always love to learn new things, and I'm encouraging everybody that, if you are willing to put in the work, it's definitely going to be a reward at the end.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you again for being a business sponsor.